Good afternoon, everyone. It is 1:02, and we're going to go ahead and begin our training this afternoon for our benchmark assessment system. Welcome to the training. This is our district's kindergarten through fifth grade reading assessment program that we use, and these assessments are used for data team meetings and with reading specialists. They also support your reading instruction for whole group, small group, and with individual students. I do want to introduce our facilitator for today, Ms. Tanya Hughes. I have known Ms. Hughes for a great many years, and she is a reading specialist alongside of being a classroom teacher. She is now a consultant and tours around lots of districts and supports reading instruction. We have used her for several trainings in the past, and those of you who have not met her before, you will adore her. She's very well versed in our benchmark assessment system. As you saw in the email, hopefully you have all the materials that you need out ready to go. Do make sure that your screen is on. This is a participatory event. And so if you are in here, we want to be able to see you so that we can support you. And if you're doubled up, you might want to go to a space where you can spread out and not be doubled up close to each other on the same screen, if that's where you are, because this will be a working event. Any questions before we turn it over to Ms. Hughes? As the presentation goes along, please use the chat feature for dropping all of your questions so that Ms. Lori McIntyre can monitor the chat and answer all questions as they come up. She will be letting Ms. Hughes know when there are questions so that when Ms. Hughes is ready to address questions, she can have them. And that way also, we're not interrupting her flow of the presentation. So if you need something that Lori needs to know right away, please private message Lori and she'll help you. All right, Tanya, take it away. Have a great training.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Well, I'm so excited to see everybody. Like Liz said, I've been able to be in Grandview District for the last couple of years, trying to help people all get on the same page with benchmark assessment system and leveled literacy intervention and all sorts of other things. So it's my understanding that you are all new to the district. Am I right in that? Is there a thumbs up, head nod, something? Okay. If you could put in the chat if this is your first year of teaching or how many years you've taught maybe in another district, that'll kind of help me kind of guide the conversation a little bit and get to know you just a little bit. I feel like the times that we're in right now is so crazy, and you've probably heard this 50 million other times from all of the other trainings that you've gone through. But if you can do this year, you can do anything. So just stick with it. I admire you all so much. And it's going to be good. So there's a lot of grace whenever it comes to this, and we're just going to try to knock out as much as we can. Please feel free to ask any questions. And then Lori, I'm going to try to have my chat on, but if there's anything pertinent that comes through, I don't know, maybe if you give me like an emoji hand wave or something so that I can look at the chat, that would be good. It's hard to be Michaela, is that how I say your name? Where are you, Michaela? First year, go girl. You're going to be awesome. 6th year, 13th, first year teacher starting in 5th grade. Love 5th grade. My 10th year teaching. Where's Marie? Where are you, Marie? Hi, Marie. So is this your first year in the district, but your 10th year teaching? Awesome. I love that. Let's see, 6th year. This is my 4th year, 3rd year, 5 months. Oh, so Lori, did you do? No.
I started in January, right before COVID.
Oh man.
Yay.
I feel like you've had like the triple effect of craziness.
Yes. It's been very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. 9 years in Grandview, and before that, 5 years in Hickman Mills. Awesome. Awesome. On here, has anyone already, let me know if you've already done some sort of benchmark assessment system, something like this. So it could be this or DRA or something that has to do with a reading record. If you've been experienced with this, you can just say, had experience in the past. If this is all brand new to you, then put that in the chat too, because that's going to help me to direct kind of where we go. I know sometimes with reading records and that, if you've taught in other districts, you might not have received official training. You may have always just kind of been thrown into it or told all the worst parts of it, and kind of gone from there. But hopefully today you'll be able to have a really good understanding of what's going on. Let's see, DRA, Dibbles, had some DRA running records. So Michaela, running records and reading records, we'll get into that, but it's used in the same word. Fountas and Pinnell, they couldn't use the word running record because it was already, I don't know if copywritten is the correct name, but they call it reading records. Some of the markings may be different though. Jan Richardson training, Dibbles, DRA, given the BAS and had training before. So it seems like everyone in some kind of way, running records in practice and student teaching, good. Okay. So this will be good. Some of the things that we're going to do today is just to be able to calibrate us. A lot of times whenever we're new, you might have a fresh slate, and that's amazing. For others, you may have pulled a lot of different versions of what running and reading records are, and we just need to be able to calibrate across the district and have the same language, the same coding, the same scoring, and same theory. That way, if kids transfer from one school to another, that we are all on the same page. So some things may be different than DRA and some things may be the same. So we'll be going over as that as well. Thank you for all the information. That is wonderful. Okay, I am going to switch over here. I'm going to exit out my full screen. And I'm going to share my screen. Attempt to here. And let me see, it's not showing up as an option. Let me pull this up. There it is. Oops. Okay. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. I can see, let's see. Give me a thumbs up if you can see my keynote presentation. Do you see benchmarks? For others, it was turning, thank you. It was coming up black before, so I was making sure. Okay, so you should all have with you a benchmark assessment kit. I understand you guys have the 3rd edition, so you should have those materials next to you. Some of the other things that you should have is the packet that you needed to print out that has your hard copies. We're going to be going through some of these and then using some of them as practice, so make sure to keep those off to the side as well. Most of you probably have assessment kits that have already been opened. Hopefully they've been opened, but they're opened, organized, have different things about them, but we'll give you a quick tutorial just in case. A little bit about me. I've been in education for 16 years. I have a master's and certification in reading from Evangel University in Springfield. I'm reading recovery certified. If you have a love for reading, I recommend anyone to go through reading recovery training. It's the best. I think it was even more beneficial than my master's degree. I was a 3rd and 4th grade classroom teacher. I've been an instructional and literacy coach for K-5 classrooms. I was a reading recovery interventionist for 1st grade and a reading specialist. I was a reading specialist and coach in independent schools for kindergarten through 2nd grade. And for the past 5 years, I've been able to be a literacy trainer in the surrounding districts and all over the place, in Kansas City and Kansas, up north in Lee Summit, and all sorts of places. So I'm excited to be here. This is my family. My husband, Jonathan, he used to be a 5th and 6th grade classroom teacher. And one of the things that he's helped me with, I love to read about reading and read all of the cool things. And I'll I feel like all of the reading books nowadays are like this thick, and I'll just sit there and read through it. And he's like, just give me the thing that I need to know. And so us both coupled on those two opposite realms have really helped. My older son is Grayson. He's 9 years old, and he's going to be going into 3rd grade. And then my little guy there, that's Oliver. He's 3. And so he's a fun little guy. A little bit about what the overview of the schedule is going to be. Again, I don't know how the pacing will be, as I haven't done the BAS assessment training online yet. I've done it live, and that's a much different feel. So we may get done sooner, or we may have to continue it at another time. But what the schedule looks like for this afternoon is from 1 to 2, I'm going to give you an overview of the BAS system. At 2 o'clock, we'll go ahead and give a break. And then we're going to do a coding and scoring tutorial at 2:10. And then after our last break, we're going to talk about analyzing and what that means to analyze our reading records and what that means for you. So I don't want to rush this part. So whatever we don't get done, we'll be able to get through. You'll leave here understanding how to give the basic parts of the BAS assessment. My cursor is gone. There we go. I need to move. Hang on. For some reason, my cursor doesn't wanna, there we go. Need to scoot it over. Okay, what is the BAS system? BAS is short for Benchmark Assessment System. I need to do a quick check. Can you guys see the entirety of the screen, or is my speaker view covering it? You can see it, okay. The Benchmark Assessment System from Fountas and Pinnell, it's a reliable source to accurately and reliably identify each child's instructional and independent reading levels and document their progress through one-on-one formative and summative assessments. It provides teachers ways and precise tools and text to observe and quantify specific reading behavior, and then interpret and use that data to plan meaningful instruction. Each assessment that you give these kiddos, so Liz told me that at the beginning of the year, which is awesome, even though you guys are starting out virtual, that you will be busing in kids to be able to take these assessments, which I think is great. I do not think that it is valid to give it virtually. You cannot see kids' reading behaviors. Fountas and Pinnell, they've put out a statement on that is not recommended. It just kind of defeats the purpose of doing a reading behavior assessment. But each assessment, what you'll walk away with is it will determine a student's instructional and independent reading level. It'll give a recommended placement level for instruction. You'll be able to form your initial groups for reading instruction. It's going to identify students who need intervention and extra help. You'll be able to monitor and report student progress across a school year and grade levels. You'll be able to assess the outcomes of teaching, and it'll help you to inform your parent conferences, which will be great. For the beginning of the year, one thing I recommend is if you cannot give an assessment to a kiddo and they've been in the district in the past, try to locate the end of year BAS that was given to be able to give a general idea of where to start. I feel like that might give you kind of a better scope even than doing it virtually if you need to. So that might be something good to access. So in your kit, and if you're wanting to kind of look through as I'm pointing out these different things, also if you've been sharing these kits, you want to make sure that you have these pieces in there. I know a lot of times if teachers are sharing them, then different pieces can go missing. The system components is you have leveled assessment books. So those are the books off to the right there. Along the bottom left-hand side, you will always see the level for the specific book, along with the number of running words. Also along the bottom of each book on the front is the book introduction that you will read at the beginning of the assessment. That same book introduction is also given on the hard copy of the assessment that you'll give the reading record on, but you'll find that for each of the books there. The other thing that you'll find in your assessment system is the assessment guide. The assessment guide, it brings you through what we're going to go over today. The one I'm holding is an older edition. You guys have the 3rd edition, which is the newest one. I think that I'm holding up a 1st or 2nd edition. This is the 2nd edition. But along the sides are little tabs to be a great reference tool for you for getting started, administering the assessment, summarizing, analyzing, monitoring, and using the results. So this is a great tool just to refer to skip to the place that you need. There is also the student forms book. The student forms book is has all of the hard copies of the assessments that you'll need. However, you should also have a logon that you can be able to access all of these hard copies online. And we'll be visiting that in just a moment. You'll go to Fountas and Pinnell Resources, and you can also print off all of the copies that you need from your computer, which is a lot easier than making copies from the hard copy there. But in case you needed it, that's where that is. There's also the Fountas and Pinnell Literacy Continuum. If there is anything that you get from this, it's that you need the Literacy Continuum book. If teachers that are not new to your building, if they're like, it's not very important, or I'm just gonna put it to the side, you hoard that thing and you keep it on your bookshelf. That is your Bible. That is going to help you to know exactly how to teach your kids right where they're at. And I'll show you a little bit about that, but that is just the greatest resource that you can possibly have. If it's not in your box, make sure you go somewhere and you find it, the Literacy Continuum. It's to the right of the box in my picture there that you can see. I really wish my cursor was working whenever I was on here. For some reason, it is not, and it's driving me crazy. Okay, the other thing you have is your BAS online data management system. That's if you guys didn't have a way to keep track of all of your results online, which I believe Grandview already does, but that's just a feature of it. There's online resources, which I'll show you. There's also professional development and tutorial videos. So if you get lost and this is like drinking from a fire hose, you can visit those tutorial videos to be able to help you. There are also student folders. You may have those in there, you may not. That's just a feature that you can utilize to be able to keep your student assessments in. And there's also an F&P calculator and stopwatch to be able to help with that. Within the benchmark books, there are 28 high quality books written expressly for the purpose of literacy assessment along the text level gradient. Each level includes one fiction and one nonfiction text. I love it because this is not a rhyming type of book. It's a book that actually has a plot and a story that's interesting. You always want to have kids reading real text. I'm a firm believer that nonsense tests with nonsense words isn't going to tell me much. I need to be able to see real text in real context. So with these, whenever you get to a specific level, the child can choose either a fiction or a nonfiction text to be able to read. A lot of times I'll present both options. If they've already tested at that level, and in the past you know that they've already tested at that fiction level, then you can choose the nonfiction text for them to be able to switch off from there. Next is the text level gradient, and you can find this in just a moment in your resources online. This was not one of the printouts, but this is very helpful for you to kind of see where you'll be going. A lot of times, whenever different companies level things, you may see letter levels, but they may not always align the same. So it's good to know where F&P or Fountas and Pinnell has those. So for kindergarten, the Fountas and Pinnell levels are A through D, and grade 1 is E through J, and then grade 2 is K through M. You'll notice that there are 2 different benchmark systems. So one, you want to make sure the benchmark system that you have is the one that fits the grade that you're going to be teaching. So system 1, and you'll see a big number 1 on your box, that's for people teaching kindergarten through 2nd grade. And then benchmark system 2, or is for people in grade 2 and higher. Obviously in grade 2 and grade 1 and 2, you might have a hybrid where you're sharing from one of those, but you'll want to be able to stick with those 2 there. I'm not going to go over the online data management. Another thing that I'll just say, Fountas and Pinnell does put out an app for taking reading records. And I love technology for a lot of things, but I really don't believe that the app can do as good of a job of taking a reading record as good old pencil and paper. There's just some things that you just cannot replace. So I would recommend always having a pencil nearby to be able to take reading records, and that goes for the benchmark assessment system, or if you're just taking a reading record during a small reading group. It sounds cool, it looks cool, but it just doesn't do the same thing. You're more concerned about how you're marking it with your pen than actually just doing the thing. So that's my 2 cents on that. The components of an assessment. So in your packet that you have, you can take out a sample assessment. Towards the end, you'll see that there is a sample assessment. If you could look at the one that says Our New Neighbors. Our New Neighbors. And you can just see on here what a sample 1 would look like. There's 2 parts to giving the benchmark assessment system. The first part has everything to do with the oral reading, and the second part has everything to do with comprehension and writing. So if you look here on the copy of Our New Neighbors, just as reference, at the top you have a place to be able to identify the student. Then you'll say it gives you instructions of what to do. There's a place for a summary of scores. And then it's the actual text that is laid out for you to be able to see. Along the side, there's areas for you to record notes, be able to record accuracy levels. And then at the end of the text, there's a place for you to be able to figure out the accuracy score, self-correction rate, which we'll talk about, fluency score, reading rate, and all of that. On the next pages, then you will see that's where the comprehension conversation comes into play. And then there is a writing portion that students will have to take there. In part 1, the main part is your accuracy rate, the oral reading analysis, which I'm hoping that I'm getting across to teachers that's been in the district. That oral reading analysis is the meat and potatoes of this whole thing. If you just go to take this to give a percentage rate, you're really doing a disservice to it. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. The self-correction ratio, fluency score, reading rate is all there. So what are reading records? For those of you that are new to this concept, you might have done markings through dibbles or something else, but the meaning of a reading record is a lot different than what you would do in a dibbles assessment. Reading records, they're quick shorthand method of note-taking to document behavioral evidence of comprehension. And this can come through markings, but also noting the students' eyes, their behaviors of what they do with their hands, where they look, if they're appealing. All of that is very important. I believe that it's important to give not only a computer assessment, but also a reading record, because you need a tangible way to be able to see what the student is doing in the moment. What do reading records tell us? They capture what young readers said and did while reading continuous text. It judges what the reader already knows. This is not a deficit model assessment. It's to give us information on what the child can do. And that's important to know where to start your instruction. It tells us what the reader attended to at difficulty, what the reader overlooked, and it allows the teacher to describe how children are working on specific concepts, skills, and words. Part two, which is what I just went over a second ago, that's the comprehension conversation, which we will get to in the last part of our training today. But I love it because it asks comprehension questions that are within the text, beyond the text, and about the text. And that'll be important to note as well. There's also a writing about reading part as well. If you're wanting more examples on this, if this doesn't answer all your questions there, in the getting started of your assessment guide, you can revisit pages to be able to understand more about that. So let me see, are we doing good for questions? Is there any questions that we have? Okay. Where to start? That's going to be your biggest thing of what to do. Within your online resources, you will find many different optional assessments, so it's important to make note of this one. Fountas and Pinnell gives a lot of different options that you can do in addition to this benchmark assessment, but this where to start test helps you to know what reading level to start your assessment at. It won't be the end-all be-all. It may not land on that specific place, but it'll give you a good idea. In your assessment kit, you should have an optional assessment spiral. It's spiral bound, and it's like a thick plastic paper. That is what the students will use to be able to look at the words, and it'll be that beginning word list that you see on the screen. For your teacher form of what you'll record the answers on, that's that picture to the right. Those can be copied off of the Fountas and Pinnell resource under optional assessments. And I would recommend just making a lot of copies of those and sticking it in the back of your box to be able to keep them there. There's also a direction sheet that you can print off. I would recommend putting that in plastic in your benchmark assessment binder. That way you can refer to this. So how this works is you would have the child go ahead and read the beginning word list, and then at the bottom you see a where to start chart. So let's say at the bottom here you have a beginning list, and on list 1 you see on the beginning list you see that they got 6 to 10 words correct. Then that would mean that you would start at a level A. However, let's say that you got to list all the way to list 2 and they got 11 to 15 of those words correct in list 2. Then that means you would start at a level G, and so on. If you want to know what the grid looks like for the benchmark assessment 2, then you can go into the optional assessments under benchmark assessment 2 to be able to get that graph as well. So that's going to be your where to start test. That part's very simple, but that helps you to know where to start. Are there any questions about that at all? Okay, good. So that's your where to start guide. This is a bigger version of what that would look like. This part is pretty self-explanatory. If they got the word, I always write off to the side what word they did say if it wasn't that exact word, because that's going to give you good information down the road too. But that's going to help you to know where to start. Some things to expect. The assessment will take approximately 20 to 30 minutes with each child. The level 2, if you're anywhere over level L, I believe that is there. Let me see here. Yeah, level L or higher. My view is wonky. It'll take 30 to 40 minutes because of the length of the text and the depth of comprehension. You'll be assessing to find out the child's independent, instructional, and hard level. Attempting to start at their independent level will work the best. Don't get nervous if you are an upper grade teacher. I know that the length of the assessment can be kind of scary. There's ways to be able to assess multiple kids at the same time. You would have one child go ahead and read the portion of text that they need to with you, take the assessment on it, send them on their way to their desk to be able to finish reading the text on their own, and then bring the next kiddo up to do the accuracy check with them. And then whenever that child goes to their desk to read the rest of the text on their own, you can pull the first child up and ask the comprehension questions to them and to be able to flip back and forth that way. I taught 3rd and 4th grade, and that was the best way that I did it, and it's doable. So just to kind of dive into what these 3 levels are, that way you can understand what independent, instructional, and hard means. The independent level, everyone to yourself, you can say independent. Everyone say independent. Let's see your arms in the air. Let's see if you're listening. Independent. There you go. Independent is what the reader can do with no assistance. This in level A through K, you're going to be looking at 95 to 100% accuracy level with a comprehension that is proficient or approaching. I'm also going to direct you within your packet of papers that you got. If you look at the resources page that I included in your packet, and it's called Scoring and Analysis at a Glance. This is one that I would recommend you put in plastic and put inside your binder. That way you can refer to that. But Scoring and Analysis at a Glance, and you can be able to see both of the keys down in the bottom to be able to determine these 3 reading levels. But you can refer to this as I talk about the 3 levels. So in A through K, 95 to 100% accuracy. However, in levels L through M, you're looking at 98 to 100% accuracy with comprehension that is proficient or approaching. The reason why older readers need a higher accuracy level is because in the beginning, in lower levels, kids are learning to read. So when you're learning to read, that grace is given there. However, in the older levels, you're reading to learn. You're needing to focus on comprehension a lot. And with that, you need a higher accuracy score to be able to help you there. So that's independent. I want everyone to go like this with your hand. Let's see if you're listening. Go like this. This is the instructional level. So instructional level to yourself, say easy, easy, little bit of work. Easy, easy, little bit of work. This was the best phrase given to me by my mentor. This is what you want instructional reading to sound like. Easy, easy, little bit of work. That's that sweet spot that you want to have your kiddos in whenever they're in their guided reading groups, is that instructional level. That gives them momentum to be able to read, but also allows you to have teaching moments to be able to accelerate them. So the instructional level for A through K is a 90 to 94% accuracy, or along with a comprehension that's proficient or approaching, or 95 to 100% accuracy with limited proficiency in comprehension. So did you see what happened there? That one compensates for the other. So it's important to have this graph down with you to be able to understand what that means. L through N, those reading levels, you're looking for 95 to 97% accuracy in order to be called instructional, with comprehension that is proficient and approaching, or 98 to 100% accuracy with limited proficiency and comprehension. Both of those options will give you an instructional reading score. Now, this is the hard level. Everyone say hard. Hard. No learning takes place at the hard level. Whenever I was teaching, I had a parent say to me, he came into a parent-teacher conference, and he's like, yeah, my son doesn't know how to read, and I just sat him down and told him to read the dictionary. And I was like, that's a horrible idea. Some people think that if I just sit down and tell someone, you need to read this, that all of a sudden the lights will come on and they'll be able to. That's why the basal approach and the one-stop shop of a whole group classroom model of the whole class reading the same book does not help, because it only facilitates a portion of your students. We need to be able to meet every learner where they're at. So in your assessment, you'll know if it's a hard level if in levels A through K, it's below 90% accuracy with any comprehension score, or 90 to 94% accuracy with limited to no proficiency in comprehension. And in levels L through N, below 95% accuracy with any comprehension score, or 95 to 97% accuracy with little to no proficiency in comprehension. At that level, it's going to be too frustrating for your kiddos. That would be their hard level. So those are the three levels that we're working with. And whenever you do the benchmark assessment, it's important that you find all three, and it's doable. So I'll show you that as well. So if we're going to start this, let's say we're going to start our assessment. These are some of the things that you need to have ready before you begin. You need to have multiple copies for each level and the book readily available. So within your assessment kit, there's these little file folders that stand up in there. I would suggest having 10 of each book stapled and ready to go of each assessment. That way you can grab it either for the assessment or throughout the year, in addition to the where to start tests. I don't know what your school regulations are right now with COVID and social distancing. It is best if you sit next to a child, or try your best to, not across. When you're sitting across, you can't look down at your paper and see their reading behaviors. It's a lot easier to take the assessment while looking at them to the side. So you want to sit next to the child, not across. Use a pencil. My favorite are the cheap Papermate ones with the lead that you screw up and down, and it's a little bit bouncy. Those are my favorite. But pencils for reading records all the time. All the time, all the time, all the time. Because there's all sorts of moments whenever you're needing to erase and you're needing to do that. So use pencil. Give enough, well, this in light of COVID for sure, give enough space for a child to breathe, no hovering. We don't have to worry about that one. And then you want to place the book in front of the student. So how you're going to start is this is a standardized test as far as in the giving of the assessment. So everything has to be the same from classroom to classroom. So you will take your assessment and you will read the title and introduction as written, but give it some life. Don't make it seem lame and boring whenever you read it. So on this one for our new neighbors, you can place the student, and it could sound like this. Ben's family and the other families on the street got a note from their new neighbors. In the note, their new neighbors invited them to see their surprise horses. Read to find out what kind of horses they were. So try to make it as conversational as possible and easy to understand. If you're needing to time the test, you can start the timer. That is not required, but there is space available for you if you're needing to, for that specific child record their rate of reading. And then you'll listen to the child read the book, and then you'll code and write anecdotal notes on how the reading sounds, which we'll practice. There's 3 components to a reading record. There's the coding. That's the coding. We'll talk about that in a moment. There's the scoring, and then there's the MSV analysis, which we'll also review. There are certain conventions for taking a reading record, and within your packet, I want you to find that paper now. It's called Coding and Scoring Errors at a Glance. And I tried to scan in these documents for you to print. So I'm so sorry if any of your copies turned out crooked. I've tried my best to put it in the scanner in the way that worked, but you can find another copy if you want it to look prettier on the Fountas and Pinnell Resources site. You need to put this in plastic. Also, I think is interesting is that my copy is only one-sided. Is your copy one-sided or is it two-sided? If it's one-sided. Okay. I need to check on that to make sure that all of the coding is on there. I'll check during break to make sure that all of them are on there. This is going to be your cheat sheet on how to code and score. If you have been used to in the past doing a different way of coding, so if it's been DIBELS or DRA, you want to be able to do the way this coding is, because Fountas and Pinnell is kind of the direction. I think that we have a lot of other resources, especially with leveled literacy intervention, mini lessons. So the more cohesive we can be in our coding, the better. So we'll review what some of these are as well, and we'll do a tutorial in that. But this is great to put in plastic also to be able to keep as a guide, and we'll go over what those are. So we are going to try to code a sample running record in just a moment. And with that coding, we're going to take it a little bit at a time. We are going to code for accurate reading, substitutions, repetitions, and then put it together. And then self-corrections and put it together. And then that way you'll be able to know the gamut of what that actually looks like. Some things here also on your sheet along the right-hand side, it helps to remind you what things are counted as an error and what things are not counted as an error. So you can also use that as a guide for you whenever you're scoring it. I'll go over this page here again whenever we're finished and it makes more sense to you, but we'll make sure to do that as well. Okay, so we are going to be going over that. We are going to take our 10-minute break just a couple minutes early. That way it can transition us to be able to be ready to practice doing our coding. So what you will need when you come back from break is you will need the thicker packet that has the loose tooth at the top, and it says substitutions at the top, and it's handwritten. There's a whole packet there, and you'll see that they do not all create complete assessments. This is sheerly for the coding and scoring. So I believe that there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 pages if you printed it off front to back to be able to look at there. So when we come back from break, you will need this packet here along with a pencil, and we're gonna listen to a sample tutorial, and we're gonna practice some of these codings and scorings here. Hang on, let me look here. Let's see. Okay, is there any questions? If any, I guess we can just do this. So it's 1:46, so let's go ahead and do at 1:56. Can we do it? 1:50. We give ourselves exactly 10 minutes to be able to get everything settled. If you're having any questions that you know that you're going to want me to answer, or questions that you've had so far, write it in the chat. That way I can have that and be ready to go. So 10-minute break. I'll see you in 10 minutes with this and a pencil and ready to go.
I just had a question. If I sign out for the 10 minutes so I can record something for my students, am I able to just click the link and hop back in?
I'm not sure. Lori, what's the answer to that? Do you know?
She might have walked away.
I think I see her there. Can she log out and then click that same link to come back in?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank
Okay,
you.
Lori. Okay, thanks. Okay, on this one where you said Okay, everyone, if you want to turn your screens back on, we are going to go ahead and start. Hopefully you got to stretch your legs for a second. Now this gets to the part where you get to actually practice something and do something. I'm going to be, you need a pencil. I'm going to be using a pen on my end just so that you can see what I'm doing, but use a pencil. And I did look at the coding and scoring sheet that you got. I'm going to direct you to the one that's on the site for the 3rd edition. This is the whole sheet. It's just a front on this version. There's a front and back version that gives a little bit more spacing, and you can choose that one as well if you want to. But what we're going to do first is we are going to talk about our first type of coding. The first type is called accurate reading. Say to yourself, accurate reading. Now, this is going to be something that if you have taught for a while, or if you're around teachers who have taught for a while, this is the common thing that I hear. I have done reading records for so long that I no longer need to keep track of accurate reading with an accurate reading check. I just know. Don't believe it? It's a lie. They don't know what they're talking about. It is so important for you to mark accurate reading because you need to, one, be able to know how to do a reading record if you don't have a copy of the text in front of you. If you're doing reading records ever in your classroom on blank papers, which you'll learn how to do at some point, you need to keep track of accurate reading with accurate reading checks. So this coding is very simple. So I have my little dry erase board here. So let's say that we have the word play. So I play, let's say that that was the whole sentence there. If the child accurately reads the words, then you would just put a check mark over it. I play. So that's all accurate reading is. It's being able to accurately identify what the child said if they said it correctly. We're not going to do a tutorial on that because I think we've got that one down. But the tutorial for it is that you have to put the accurate reading check. Everyone promise me now that you will do the accurate reading check, and I will know, we will see. And usually if you're in a training, then we like knock somebody's elbow because even by the end of this training, someone has already decided that they don't need to put the accurate reading check, and I don't know why, but you need to put the accurate reading check. So that's the first kind of coding. The second type is substitutions. Everyone say substitutions. Very good. So for substitutions, you can find that on your coding sheet here. And that is whenever the child gives an incorrect response for the actual word that is said. So as they're reading, they may say sleigh for play. So how you would record that, maybe a different color would be good. I'm trying to see something that's easily visible. If they said, if the child said sleigh for play, how you would do that is write what the child wrote above the line, and this is the text. It's very important to always write your line. That's draw your line. That's another thing that's good to get in the habit of. Everything on the bottom is either going to be what the text says or what the teacher says. That's important to remember too. So I'm going to write that down as a little bitty reminder. Everything below the line, and it's T or T. And then everything above the line is student. So that can be able to help you as we get a little bit deeper into this, but everything on top is everything that the student is saying. Everything on bottom is everything that the text is saying or that the teacher is saying. Important, and you need that line there. So that's a substitution. Whenever you put above the line what the student actually said, if they said an incorrect word. So we're gonna have that as our first tutorial. So on the copy of the loose tooth, we're going to hear a reading, and you are going to use your skill of accurate reading check marks and of using substitutions, and we'll check our work. So I'm going to share the screen here, and hopefully this will work and we'll be able to read through it. So let's get ready on the substitutions. Yep, substitutions page. That's where we should be. And so let me show you the site because that's where I'm going to be going right now. Let me see. Did I share my screen yet? Nope. Share. So this is what it looks like whenever you log on to the Fountas and Pinnell Resources site. And you can look up here, it's resources.fountasandpinnell.com. You should have a username and password already at your building. If not, then you will want to ask your instructional coach or Liz to be able to get yours. It's usually found, instructions for that is in the inner booklet cover of your assessment guide, but your building should already have that. Once you log on, you will see BAS 1 or 2. We're going to be visiting 1, but 1, remember, is for the lower grades, and then 2 is for the upper grades. When you log on to the site, these are where all of your recording forms are kept. So on here, if I needed to be able to find the reading record for the text Best Friends, then I would click on Best Friends, and then here is my recording form that I can be able to print out. Pretty easy. The next tab, so it's for all of those levels there. The next tab is your summary forms tab. And there you have all sorts of good things that you can use to be able to put down your assessment summary, which we will also do. And if you want class record forms, any kind of extra forms there. There are also optional assessments. This is where that where to start test is found. So when you go down here, here's the where to start test. Here's the student form. Here's the teacher form. Here's the directions. The student form, you can use that hard plastic spiral. I would just make a lot of copies of the teacher form and then the directions there. And then look, there's like so many different optional assessments that you can give on so many things that I haven't even utilized, but any type of optional assessment, there it is. The next section is resources. This gives just some different things to do for professional development. A reminder sheet on finding easy, instructional, and hard levels. Here is that updated version of the coding and scoring at a glance form. If you wanted the two-sided version that looks like this and has a little bit more room than the one I gave you, you can print one off there. And a lot of other parent letters and all sorts of things. The videos is what we're going to be accessing today, but these are tutorials on the given sections if you want to be able to refer to that later. So I'm going to go into tutorials and coding oral reading, and we're going to do the one on
make sure you have the recording form for the
substitutions. And I will go ahead and make that large. Get that up there. Okay, and we should be ready to go.
You. Listen to the text and begin coding on page 8 and stop at the end of page 16. You will record accurate reading and any substitutions you hear. Kate went to school. She played with her teeth at school. Do not play with your teeth, said her teacher. Kate played with her teeth at lunch. She wiggled it and wiggled it. Do not wiggle your tooth, said Ben. I have to eat my lunch. Kate went home. Her brother played with him blocks. Kate played with her tooth. It is time to eat, said Mom. come and get some soup. Kate had some soup. She said, "Next, I want an apple. I want a big, big apple." Kate took a big, big bite of the apple. "Look, Mom," Kate said, "look at my tooth now."
Okay, how did we do? Let's go ahead and we're going to check to see how you did. So on mine here, I did it in pen so that way you could see. I also wrote off to the side how the reading sounded. I'm going to tell you what I thought this time. This is obviously someone doing this as a teacher, but I put WBW to mean word by word. It sounded very word by word whenever she was reading it. But we're going to go through and see how you did. So let's check your answers.
Let's see how you did with coding substitutions. Here is what it would look like. Check your work. Your goal is to record everything the way it was read. Let's look at the substitutions page by page, beginning on page 8. On page 8, you heard teeth for tooth. On page 9, you heard do not for don't, teeth for tooth, and her for Kate's. On page 10, you heard teeth for tooth. On page 11, you heard do not for don't and have for want. On page 12, you heard him for his, and on page 13, you heard get for have. On page 14, you heard next for now and a for an. And on page 15, you heard the for her. Finally, page 16 was read accurately. How'd you do with your coding?
I always feel like she sounds a little like, how'd you do? Like, how'd you think that happened? So how did we do? That was the first one. Very easy, taking it slow. Give a thumbs up where you're at. You think you did okay? Okay, good. So that's the basic of the substitutions of how we're gonna go. It's gonna get faster and it's gonna get a lot more, but if we're on the same page, then that's good. The one thing I wanted to point out is whenever the child read do not for don't, that counts as one error, not two. So anytime there's a contraction, so if it goes from don't to do not or do not for don't, one error. And it actually explains that on your coding and scoring guide at a glance. It'll say here, misreading contractions, reads contraction as 2 words or 2 words as contraction, 1 error each time. And it actually says that right there to be able to refer to. Okay, so now we're gonna kick it up a notch and we are gonna go to repetitions and then we're gonna consolidate all 3. So with a repetition, this might be a little bit different if you've done DRA or something else before, but for the repetition, it's given as, let me get myself here. Okay, so on here, it's given as if you have the word all, and the child is reading and says all, and repeats themselves, then that's going to be coded with a check mark and an R for repetition right off to the side. However, if they do a repetition for more than 1 word, so on here they have the example fox made a plan. So on here for this sentence, if the child reads, Fox made a plan, and then they repeat the whole line, Fox made a plan, then you want to be able to take your overarcher and put it back to where they began, and then you want to put an R there at the end to be able to indicate that that's the section of text that was repeated. That's what the repetition would look like there. You always want to go in order of what's happening within the text. So that's why you can be able to go back and reread exactly how they reread if you have your coding there. So that's repetition. It's one R for one word, and then you put the overarcher if it's for more than one word. Okay, so we're going to try it for repetitions and see what happens. So go to the next part of your packet to where it says repetitions at the top. And
You didn't get confused by the
oh, goodness gracious.
contractions, did you?
Go back.
Let's continue on.
Oh, goodness. Just scoot this over. Okay. Tutorials, repetitions. Okay.
To the
Fast forwarding where we need to do our tutorial.
recording form for the loose tooth. Begin coding on page 2 and code through page 7 as you listen to the reading. Code accurate reading and any repetitions you hear. Kate had a loose tooth. Her tooth was very loose. Her tooth was very loose. Kate played with her tooth, but it did not come out. Don't play with your tooth, said Kate's mom. Eat your breakfast. I want my tooth to come out, said Kate. Your tooth will fall out, said Mom. Kate wiggled her tooth. Kate wiggled her tooth, but it did not fall out. Kate brushed her teeth after breakfast. She wanted her tooth to come out. She wanted it to come out now. She brushed and brushed. She brushed her loose tooth, but it did not fall out. Let's see how you did with the coding. Here is what it would look like. Go ahead and check your work. Because there aren't repetitions on every line, let's look at each page like we did with the substitutions. On page 2, was was repeated and the sentence was repeated. In the last sentence, come was repeated twice. You heard it 3 times. The first time was the accurate reading, and the next 2 times were the repeats. On page 4, breakfast was repeated. On page 5, Kate's name was repeated, and then the sentence was repeated. On page 6, after was repeated, and out was repeated twice. On page 7, the words, but it did not, were repeated. Remember that when a repeat is more than a word, the arrow is drawn back to the place where the repeat begins, so you know how much of the text was reread.
Okay. How did we do there? What questions do we have? Do we have any questions for that? Okay, so we have there, the one thing I didn't go over was the repetitions. So the number of repetitions. If they repeat it more than 1 time, then that number indicates the total number of times it was repeated. That's going to be the important thing. And that's also outlined on your coding and scoring at a glance form. Are we doing good? Okay, we are going to go on. Let's see. We are going to combine. We're going to consolidate all of these together. So accurate reading, substitutions, and repetitions. So let's see what happens here.
We're going to do a consolidation of the coding conventions that you've learned so far. As you listen, code accurate reading, substitutions, and repetitions. Notice that the coding begins to look like what a reader might really do as he reads a text. Use your second recording form for the loose tooth to code from page 8 through page 16. Kate went to school. She played with her teeth at school. Do not play with your tooth. Tooth, said Kate's teacher. Kate played with her teeth at lunchtime. She wiggled it and wiggled it. Don't wiggle your teeth, said Ben. I have to eat my lunch. She went home. Her brother played with some blocks. Kate played with her teeth. It's time to eat, said Mom. Can you have some soup? Kate had some soup. She said, next, I want an apple. I want a big, big apple. Kate took a big, big bite of the apple. Kate took a big, big bite of the apple.
Going crazy here.
Look, Mom, said Kate. Look at my tooth here.
Okay, so we're gonna go and see how we did. There's a lot of things here, and already you wanna make sure, have you been putting your accurate check marks? And are you putting the line on your substitutions? If not, make sure you're doing it right now, even in the practice. Let's check and see how we did.
Readers do some interesting things as they process a text, so let's see how you did at capturing the reading. Beginning on page 8, you heard mostly accurate reading. The repetition of words Kate went to at the beginning of the reading and one substitution of teeth for tooth. On page 9, you heard accurate reading, substitution of 2 words for the contraction do not for don't, and repetitions of tooth and the phrase said Kate's teacher. On page 10, you heard mostly accurate reading and 2 substitutions, teeth for tooth and lunchtime for lunch. On page 11, you heard accurate reading, 2 substitutions, teeth for tooth and have for want, as well as the repetition of the words your teeth. On page 12, you heard substitutions of she for Kate, some for his, and teeth for tooth. Notice the substitution of teeth for tooth has been consistent throughout the reading. On page 13, you heard more substitutions. It's for it is, can for come, and you for and. If you consider how that last sentence was read, it would make sense and sound right to ask someone, can you have some soup? Unfortunately, the punctuation does not support that reading, and the lack of a question mark seemed to be unnoticed by the reader. On page 14, you heard more substitutions, next for now and a for an, mixed with accurate reading and the repetition of the phrase, she said. How's your coding matching up? On page 15, you heard almost accurate reading with 1 substitution of the for her, and then a repeat of the entire sentence. Finally, on page 16, you heard 3 substitutions, 2 of which were said Kate for Kate said, and here for now, along with accurate reading.
Okay, so I think that this last page, I'm gonna see how you guys did. Hopefully you did okay. Whenever you're repeating a big chunk of text, you can just see how that line just whips all the way back to the very beginning. Also here, whenever they're flip-flopping words, you do not want to get in the habit of putting an arrow to say like it flip-flopped. You want to actually put said for Kate and Kate for said. No shortcuts. You can't take any shortcuts in this. It's got to be the way it's supposed to be coded. So that is the kind of the combination of all of those things in there. How are we doing? Are we doing okay? We consolidated it? Good. Okay. We're not going to do all the consolidations that are in this packet. I think we're going to fly through to self-corrections and the other 2 and then combine it all together at the end. But this will be good. So you've gotten kind of your feet wet a little bit. Hopefully you're putting your accurate reading checks and your lines underneath. Be really good. So everyone kind of stretch your arms in the air, stretch it to the side. Reading records are so exciting. Okay. Let's see. I'm going to go ahead and put it on here. I'm going to take it off here. And we're going to go backwards and back to videos. That way we can make sure and have all of that ready to go. Coding oral reading. Okay, the next thing is going to be self-corrections. And on the self-corrections, you can look at your self-corrections place on your coding and scoring sheet. Self-correction is whenever a student corrects a previous error. Self-corrections and repetitions do not count as errors. Those are great things. You want to know that your kids are self-correcting and that they're repeating their reading, because that means that they're thinking about what it is that they are reading. This is how you would code it. If a child said, if he self-corrected himself, if we look on here, the word was and then the child said our, you would do a self-correction by doing a line with an SC. If you notice, I've started making now lines that go down to be able to separate the last attempts. That's very important, because as you go on, you're going to note again that whatever the teacher or the text says is on the bottom, whatever the student is doing is on top. The student self-corrected. He corrected and said and. Okay, that's how that would sound. If they self-corrected themselves, that SC coding goes on top, and you need that line to be able to separate your attempts. Because if a student, where did my eraser go? If a student does a couple of things, let's say that the student said our and, okay? Let's say that the student attempted 2 other tries and then self-corrected. You want to write down each attempt that the child made at the word. That's very important to be able to keep in mind. That only can be done with the lines that divide it right there. Okay, so let's practice that. Self-corrections. I'm gonna fast forward it. Place.
Through page 7 as I read the text aloud.
You're at the part that says
Code only
self-corrections
accurate
at the
reading
top
and
of your
self-corrections
packet.
this time. Kate had a little tooth, a loose tooth. Her tooth was very loose. Kate played with her tooth, but it did not fall out. Don't play with your tooth, said her mom. Don't play with your tooth, said Kate's mother. Eat your breakfast. I want my tooth to come out, Kate said. Your tooth will fall out, said Mom. Kate wiggled her tooth, but it didn't fall out. Kate brushed her teeth at breakfast. She wanted her tooth to come out. She wanted it to come out now. She brushed and brushed. She brushed her loose tooth, but it did not fall out. So let's see how you did on your recording of self-corrections. We'll go page by page. On page 2, he read little for loose, but on the reread, he self-corrected the error.
Okay, so did you see what happened there? Whenever the self-correction happens on the repetition, you need to connect a line to the self-correction here. So when it was read, Kate had a little tooth, a loose tooth. I know that it was self-corrected, not right away, but only when it was repeated. And the only way we know that is if you draw a little line from the repetition to be able to indicate that's when it happened. Does that make sense? So that is a weird little example, but that happens a lot.
Then he read the for her, but self-corrected right away. He read fall for come, but left it uncorrected. On page 4, he read, don't play with your tooth, said her mom. And then he reread and self-corrected one error, but made another. Don't play with your tooth, said Kate's mother.
So that one was a doozy too. That one was crazy. On this one, what had happened here is that he self-corrected. You want to note that everything that's happening from left to right is the order that it happened. So on here, whenever they went back and self-corrected, again, the self-correction happened on the repetition. That's why it's connected to that repetition mark. And then mother was actually said after the repetition. It didn't happen on the first time. So that's why it's important to be able to document from left to right what actually happened. So it wasn't until the repetition that mother was said. That's kind of a wonky example. That kind of thing won't happen too often, but it's possible. Just make sure whatever's happening, if someone would go back and reread your reading record, they could tell when the error or when the self-correction happened. Does that make sense? That's a lot. Okay, let's keep going.
On the final line, he read, Kate said for said Kate, and he left it uncorrected. On page 5, he read come for fall, but self-corrected it immediately. He also substituted didn't for did not and left it. On page 6, he substituted tooth for teeth, but self-corrected right away. He went on to substitute at for after and left it uncorrected. On page 7, he read accurately until the last line where he substituted come for fall and then self-corrected his error. You'll notice that many, but not all errors are corrected. Can you see the difference between those errors that were self-corrected right away and those that were self-corrected as a result of a rereading? Look for that little mark coming down from the line that indicates rereading. And sometimes you have to wiggle the rereading line around, especially if it goes back several lines.
Okay, so that was the self-corrections. It's like our Tetris game. We're piling them on top of each other. If you have any questions, make sure you're asking them as we move on, because now we're going to go to omissions and insertions, and then we're going to be combining the whole kit and caboodle all together. So your next marking that you're going to learn about is omissions and insertions. So if you go on your, let me stop my screen sharing here. Hey, Lori, am I the host? Can they see my screen larger, I wonder? I didn't know how that worked, if I was or not. On here, let me look. Oh, I did see some of the chat here. What?
Speaker view. Do you see speaker view in the top right-hand corner?
Yeah. It shows you as the
It shows me.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Because you're speaking, that's why.
Or you can
She has
pin-
hers in speaker view.
Or you can pin her and then she'll stay up.
how do I do that?
Click on her box,
Okay.
those little circles, pin video, pin video.
You're wonderful. Okay, I'm going to catch up on some of the chat here too. In coding at a glance, it shows there's always, let's see, there's a check and an R, but the example on the screen did not have the line. Does that matter? The check mark and the R is because it's for just, I think it just got answered, but it was for solely one word. You don't have to do the line if the repetition is on the word. If they switch words around, can we just draw a switch arrow? Nope, you cannot draw the switch arrow. You've got to be able to draw Kate said or said Kate, because when it comes to the analyzing part of it, you're going to need to analyze those two words there. I know that that's hard, but that's all a part of us being able to, it's a great question because I get it every time. But it's a part of us being able to collaborate what our things are. Great question though, that's perfect. Okay, so for omissions and insertions, this one's super easy. If a child skips a word, so if the word is fish and the child does not say the word or skips over it, you still need that separation line, but you're gonna put a little bitty dash above it. And that's also on your coding and scoring there. If there is an insertion, that means that they insert a word between two words. It's the upward caret and then you write in the word that they said. So if the word was and then, oops, I did it wrong. If they inserted and between two words, you would have that little caret, and then you would just insert the word right there. So that one's pretty easy. That one I feel like is more natural for us to be able to go through. So I'm not going to do the omissions and insertion exercise. I think that one's pretty self-explanatory. We are going to skip right to the consolidation of everything. So we are going to do accurate reading, substitutions, self-corrections, insertions, omissions, repetitions. The only thing that will not be in this consolidation, which we're going to learn about in a second, is everything that the teacher would do. That would have everything to do with an appeal and a told, and we'll get to that in just a moment. We are going to consolidate everything that we just learned into one. So get your stretching muscles ready. Here we go. And then after we're done with appeals and told, we'll take our last break, and then we will do the next part of the assessment. You guys are doing fantastic. Okay, let me go here. Let's go here. And omissions, insertions, consolidation 3. Consolidation. Here we go. We're consolidating it all. It's kind of cut off on the top of the page where it says consolidation 3, but hopefully you can see it.
This is our final consolidation.
Here we go.
You will need the 6th clean copy of the recording form for the loose tooth. On this recording, Olivia is the reader, so complete the top portion of the recording form now with her name. You will code accurate reading, substitutions, repetitions, self-corrections, omissions, and insertions. That's everything you've learned thus far and makes up virtually all of the conventions you'll need to record oral reading behaviors. Begin on page 2 and code through the end of the text on page 16. And don't forget to make a few notes about how Olivia's reading sounded. Kate had a loose tooth. Her tooth was very loose. Kate played with her tooth, but it didn't fall out. Don't play with your tooth, said Kate's mom. Eat your breakfast. I want the tooth to fall out, said Kate. Your tooth will fall out, said Mom. Kate wiggled the tooth. but it did not fall out. Kate brushed her teeth after breakfast. She wanted her tooth to come out. She wanted it to come out now. She brushed and brushed. She brushed her loose tooth, but it did not come out. Kate went to school. She played with her tooth. Don't play with that loose tooth, said Kate's teacher. Kate played with her tooth at lunchtime. Lunch. She wiggled it and wiggled it. Don't wiggle your tooth, said Ben. I half want to eat my lunch. Kate went home. Her brother played with his blocks. Kate played with her tooth. It is time to eat, said Mom. Come here and have some soup. Kate had some soup. She said, now I want an apple. I want a big, big apple. Kate took a big, big bite of the apple. Look, Mom, said Kate. Kate said, look at my tooth now.
Ooh, they saved the best for last. It was like the fireworks finale.
Don't forget to jot down a statement as to how Olivia's reading sounded. It looks like Olivia is an active reader in that she does understand that it's her responsibility to initiate problem solving when she comes across a difficulty. Let's look at the
Okay,
coding
let's see how we
of
did.
Olivia's reading. Most of the reading can be recorded easily, as Olivia read with a fairly high level of accuracy. On page 2, she substituted didn't for did not and fall for come on line 4. On page 4, she made 3 substitutions, teeth for tooth, which she fixed immediately, and the for my and fall for come, which she left uncorrected. On page 5, she substituted the for her, and then she self-corrected her substitution of come for fall. She read page 6 accurately after working her way through the word brushed, and so this is how it's recorded.
It's really important to note on that one, it's not seen as a self-correction. It's seen as accurate reading. It's whenever kids are trying to work through a word, it wasn't that she was saying a wrong word, she was just breaking the word into parts, which is actually a great reading strategy. So she said burr, bruh, brushed. So you'll also notice that they put dots in between each part instead of the line. Those dots help to indicate that that is separating the word parts and not giving a new word. Does that make sense? So it's seen as accurate reading, not a self-correction. Neither one counts as an error, but it's important to note for your self-correction count.
On page 7, she substituted come for fall and left it uncorrected. On page 8, she omitted the last line of the text, at school. And on page 9, she substituted that for your and inserted loose in the same line. On page 10, she substituted lunchtime for lunch and then immediately self-corrected her reading. On page 11, she read have for want and then self-corrected that substitution. Page 12, she read accurately. On page 13, she inserted here in her reading, and page 14 was read accurately. On page 15, she substituted the for her and left it uncorrected. And finally, on page 16, Olivia read said Kate for Kate said and self-corrected her reading on the repeat.
See, now you know why we can't just put the arrows, because we needed to indicate that there was a self-correction on each of those words, and then we'll be going on to analyze that. But you'll see that the self-correction was done on the repetition, and that's really important to be able to note there, that that line comes off of the self-correction word. So how did we do? Did we do okay? What questions do you have? You can, I'm not sure, can you unmute yourself if you want to ask a question? I think if you can unmute yourself and you have a question or a comment, go ahead and say that now. You guys are all masters. Is that what it is? You guys all know how. Lunchtime is a tricky one because it's one word and not two. So it wasn't counted as an insertion. It was just counted as one word, and that's fine.
When you are like documenting that they did an insertion, does it matter which way it goes?
I would always stick to how they're doing the coding. So it's a caret going up, and then you put the word at the top, because when you get to the appeals and tolds in a second, if you put it underneath, remember, everything below the line is what the text or the teacher says. Everything above the line is what the student says. So to keep in line with that, if you would put the caret down, it would end up going below that line. And you want to keep everything the student is doing above the line. That's a great question.
You might do this later in the next hour, but so the example that we had in this last run with the brush, and the student tried several and sounded it out. Let's say the student wasn't able to get that word. At what point do you, as the person evaluating them, do you help them with the word, or do you just have them move on?
That's a great question. So that's this next part. You're right. No, you're perfect. If they would have just said bruh and it wasn't brushed, then you would say burr, bruh, and leave it. And then that would be counted as an error. If for some reason they pause with this assessment, this is different than a reading record that you would do just on your normal progress monitoring. With this, you want, if they keep going, then you just roll with it. It's when they appeal. An appeal means when they either look at you like, I need you to give me the answer, or when they just pause and you know that they're stuck. You want to wait that sweet spot of time, and then you give the told. So if there would have been a stop, I would have said, you try it. That would have been my next thing if they hadn't tried anything. If they've tried it like on burr, bruh, and they're just sitting there, I would say brushed. And then I would indicate that with a told, which is that last mark that we're going to learn. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I would think that the sounding out part where we practice, that would be a good note that they did have some tools in their toolbox.
That's exactly right. And that's what this next part too. Right now, we're getting the coding of it. And then on the next part, whenever we actually listen to a real child, we're going to document how that reading sounds. What are some of the things that we notice that the child could do? Because remember, this isn't a deficit model, it's what it could do. So you're right, you could be able to say, knows how to break words into parts. That's a great reading strategy to know how to have and to be able to note off to the side. I might put like word breaking strategies or something off to the side to be able to note that, but that's really good. Good. What other questions? Okay, we're going to do that appeal and told, and we'll take our last break. But think of your questions too if you have one. This we won't do a coding for. You're just going to listen because you can see there's a lot of different ways that this could look. So you're just going to watch.
Sometimes readers get themselves into a situation where they have tried all they know how to do, or they don't know what to do. Many times they will appeal for help. If a reader appeals for help by saying, "What's that word?" or "I don't know that word," then a capital A is written above the text because the reader did the appealing. If the reader stops or is unable or unwilling to proceed but does not appeal for help, the most neutral thing that you can do is to tell the word to the reader. This is called a told, and because it is a teacher intervention, a capital T is written alongside the word, not above it. It's written there below the line because the action was taken by the teacher, not the reader. So if the word loose was told to the reader, it would be recorded like this. When a reader verbally appeals for help, the appeal is turned back to him and the teacher says, "You try it." The appeal by the reader is coded as a capital A above the word, again because it's initiated by the reader, and the response, "You try it," is coded as a capital Y, and it's written alongside the word because it was spoken by the teacher. Now in this first example for loose, the reader makes no response and then appeals to the teacher. The teacher says, "You try it," and the reader reads the word correctly. In example 2, the reader appeals, "I don't know that word." The teacher responds, "You try it." The reader says little, and the coding continues. In example 3, the reader appeals, "I don't know that word." Because of the appeal, the teacher says, "You try it." The reader says nothing, and the teacher makes a decision to give a told to get the reader going again. Dr. Clay, in her latest version of an observation survey of early literacy achievement, suggests waiting no longer than 3 seconds to preserve the storyline. In example 4, the reader substitutes los for loose and then says, "Is that right?" After the appeal by the reader, the teacher makes a decision that the reader has done what she knows how to do and gives the reader a told. Now, you will listen to a reading of this convention, but you won't code it. Beginning on page 2 of the recording form, listen to both the reader and the teacher as the reading takes place through page 5.
And we aren't going to do that particular part there. Does that kind of help with the appeal and the told to know what to do there? And we're not going to practice that specific part, but hopefully that helps a little bit there. The last thing before we take our break is I wanted to be able to show you, and I'm trying to see how to share this. It would be okay. This was that screen that I had up before, that things that count as an error. And we will be talking about this when we come back at break. A substitution counts as an error, an omission, an incorrect attempt, an unsuccessful appeal. That means that the child looked at you and either you gave a told or nothing happened. That's an unsuccessful appeal, a told word, and an insertion. The things that do not count as errors are self-corrections. That's good. That means monitoring. Repetitions, a correct attempt, a successful appeal, and words pronounced differently in a child's dialect or accent. That's something that's very important to be able to consider with kiddos that may have accents that are different from yours. So we are going to, you did it. You did that next section of coding. We're going to take a break. It is 2:56. So let's go ahead and stretch your legs out and let's meet back at 3:10. And we will finish out the last portion, kind of moving on, talking a little about NSV and then talking about the comprehension and writing portion of the assessment. So I'll see you in just a couple minutes. If you have any questions, I'll stick on here. You can go ahead and put them on the chat or you can say them out loud to me. Okay, here we go for the last leg. Hopefully you're able to take a break. Again, if you have any questions, and you can go ahead and talk it out if you want to. Was there any questions or any kind of things that you had before we do the last portion at all that you wanted to ask before we went on? Okay. What you're going to need, I'm going to talk a little bit. We're going to be putting all of this together. Usually this is a full day training. I didn't really know how it would work out in Zoom. And so it's kind of like just trying to figure out what attention spans are to be able to break it. So some of the things you may have to go back to look a little bit more in depth of, but this is going to give you what you need. So at the end, we're going to actually do a sample assessment with a real child. But I wanted to be able to continue to talk about the next part of the assessment. That way you felt like you knew what to do. So after you listen to a child give the reading record, you are going to then go on to the comprehension conversation. We'll talk about this in a moment whenever we do with Nathan, but you do not need to do the comprehension conversation if that reading record scored in the hard zone. You can abandon that level and then go to the next level down. You don't need to ask the comprehension conversation unless it is in the instructional realm or in the independent realm. You can ask the comprehension conversation questions for that. So I'm going to share my screen again. So this kind of goes to the point of me talking through those accurate reading marks. And this is solely for older readers who read faster and longer periods of text. Mari Clay, she is an amazing person in the realm of reading. She did a lot of theory work and has written books, Observational Survey, and different things to reading recovery. Anyway, she says, older proficient readers become fast readers too fast for the teacher to make ticks or checks for every word. Then the observer can give up recording the correct responding and keeping strictly to the layout of lines and text, record all the processing the reader does to monitor, solve words, and self-correct. I don't know why the comma was after and, sorry. But basically what it is saying is that if the text does get too fast for you to keep up with the accurate reading marks, this would probably be higher than a level L. Then you can go ahead and not do the accurate reading check marks, but I usually have been able to, especially since when I'm not doing a BAS, I usually do my reading records on a blank sheet. So the second part to this comprehension conversation, if you want to go ahead and take out your copy of Our New Neighbors, that can kind of help you to refer to what the comprehension conversation looks like. And that is on page 6 here. If you'll notice, there are questions within the text, and there are questions beyond and about the text. In further training, you'll start to understand what within, beyond, and about are. It's a key format to Fountas and Pinnell. Within the text, that's those right there answers. Beyond and about, those are the comprehension strategies, predicting, inferring, synthesizing, critiquing. Those types of questions are there. In the first kit, you'll notice that there are 6 points total that a child can get that is at the bottom. That is because in kit number 1, they combined the beyond and about the question, the beyond and about the text questions together. In the next section, for the older readers, there are questions solely beyond the text, and solely about the text, and each section is worth 3 points. So in the older kit, you'll see that there are 9 points total. So your proficiency at the bottom there differs a little bit. So this is a level J, and if you look at the bottom, 5 to 6 total is proficient, 4 is approaching proficiency, 3 is limited, and 0 to 2 is not proficient. For the older kits, you'll want to look at the bottom to see the proficiency scale there. And just a reminder, if you forget what you're looking for, you can refer to your scoring at a glance whenever you get your accuracy score coupled with your comprehension score to equal that level of learning that the reader is actually on. Also within your stack, you'll see another paper. This is another good one to put in plastic, and it says Guidelines for Standardizing Administration of the Comprehension Conversation. Go ahead and take that out. It's the one that gives the guidelines for it. This is something that you will need to read to make sure that you are using the same language as everyone else around you. Before, it says what to do before and then during the actual assessment. So I'm going to give us about 1 minute to be able to skim and scan over this page on your own right here, the page that says Guidelines for Standardizing Administration of the Comprehension Conversation. It looks like this. I'm going to give us about 1 minute to just skim and scan over what those guidelines are to make sure that your intonation is correct. I'm trying to see if there was a page number.
Tanya, is that in our packet or is that in
Yeah, that's in your packet.
I'm not seeing mine. I'm flipping.
Did anybody else have it in theirs? Okay. It's just a 1-pager. Guidelines for, and it's kind of cut off in the top, and it says a section that says before and a section that says during. What I can do too, let me do this. I will go ahead and just put it up here.
I'm told it's 2 pages after our last running record we just took in your packet. Does that make sense?
Yes, I found it. Thank you.
Yay, I also just went ahead and put it, well, that doesn't help. It's on the right. That's the only way I can make it full. Oops. Nope, that's not what I want. It's that portion on the right there. Okay, so hopefully this helps to be able to standardize it, especially not being leading whenever you are giving answers, whenever you're asking the question. A lot of times, even if you feel like the student isn't understanding the question, it's easy to be leading whenever you're giving the answer, and you want to try to not do that. But to be able to give them enough information for them to be able to understand. So this is always really good to be able to go over. Also, if any coaches are listening, this is also a great review to just say to teachers, because a lot of time they're just old habits kind of stay strong. And so to just kind of reread over that. Also, whenever you are doing the scoring of your comprehension questions, you'll notice in the clip that we watch that if they answer a question already, you do not need to re-ask the question in a different way. So if you notice as they're writing, as they're talking, that they answer another question in their discussion, then you can omit a question because they answered the other question previously. If you're wanting to know kind of what the 0, 1, 2, and 3 means in detail, I also included this sheet here. It's the rubric for scoring the comprehension conversation. And this is what levels A through K means. And this is levels L through Z. This is also in your packet. It records, and there's differences. So what a level 2 means for a fiction compared to a nonfiction, whether you are in an L through Z or an A through K. So that also can be a professional development activity that you guys go over once you've kind of done a couple of the assessments to calibrate your scoring. Are you looking at the comprehension, the way they're answering the questions the same? That's another great one to be able to put in plastic, but for time's sake, we won't be able to read that fully. So those are the comparative sides in both the front and the back. And that's just what we read over there, that comprehension conversation during the text. So once you've gone through and you've done the comprehension, the writing portion is optional. However, I would strongly recommend, if it's the beginning of the year, that you have your kiddos do the writing portion, because reading and writing are a reciprocal process. Middle of year, I would honestly see this as an option for kiddos that you're wanting to see how their writing has improved, because that does take up extra time. It's the same thing though. The child needs to be able to answer the comprehension questions with you. They can be let alone to be able to do the writing portion. For some kiddos, you may need to sit directly next to them, but on this specific one of Our New Neighbors, it says, write about how the story ends. Is it a good ending? Why? You can draw a picture to go with your writing. There is a tutorial on the Fountas and Pinnell Resources site. If you wanted to look at different levels of writing and how they would have scored it to be able to calibrate that further, there is a simplified rubric here. And in your assessment guide book under writing, there's another detailed rubric, much like the comprehension conversation, if you want to calibrate how you're scoring the writing, if it is excellent, partial, very limited, or no understanding. But that can also be a help too whenever you're on that specific level. So let's say that you have now, you are on a portion, you've done the accuracy check, and you have figured out where they are at. After you have gone through and you've figured out what their independent, instructional, and hard level is, it's important for you to analyze what the instructional level was, for you to analyze their actual reading there for meaning, structure, and visual cues. These 3 cueing systems are all needed for a student to be able to make meaning. This I'm just going to give you a quick little tutorial on. I know you'll go deeper into this as you understand it, but I need to make sure that you know the basic nuts and bolts of it, as this is very important to the assessment. This is not done during the assessment while the student is here. This is after you found their instructional level, and then you can be able to analyze it to see what they do when they read. There are 3 different cueing systems, M, S, and V. The M stands for meaning, the S stands for structure, and the V stands for visual. For meaning, you want to ask yourself on a specific error, does it make sense? Did the meaning of the text influence the error? The S is the structure, and you want to ask yourself, does it sound right? Does the error fit an acceptable English language structure? And then visual, does it look right? Did the reader use any visual information when making that particular substitution? So whenever you're analyzing a student's reading record afterward, you want to consider some of these questions. How is the child working on problems? How does the child use self-corrections? Do they self-correct at all? Is the child's reading steadily becoming more fluent and well-phrased? Does the child cope with tricky language structures? And does the child engage the story? Those are all good anecdotal notes to be keeping off to the side. To help you kind of know what it would mean when a student gets a word incorrect, however, you can tell that they are using visual cues whenever they're making that error, it would be this. So visual cues are what the letters and words look like. You want to ask yourself, does the substitution that the student used, does it look like the word in the text? So this is an example. Let's say that the text says, I like to see horses at the farm. And the student said, I like to see hears at the farm. It doesn't make sense at all. However, it is visually similar because the beginning and the ending of the word have an H and an S. It's visually similar for the actual letters. So we would say that they were attending to visual cues. They were paying attention to visual cues, even though they got the word wrong. It doesn't mean that they didn't know the word. It has everything to do with what that word is. So whenever you look at a reading record, the worst thing you can do is look at it and say, oh man, it means that they didn't know this word, and this word. I'm going to put it on their spelling list. A lot of times it has everything to do with context, and you kind of have to look deeper. So on an error, I can say, well, this person was attending to visual cues because it is visually similar. Meaning, if they're attending to meaning, it means that the meaning or general context of the total story or the sentence was reflected in the substitution. So this is the question that you ask yourself. Does it make sense? So if the text says, I like to see horses at the farm, and the reader said, I like to see ponies at the farm, did that make sense? That made sense. Ponies is like horses, even though, and I would say it's probably visually similar too at the end, but we would say that they were attending to meaning whenever they made the substitution, which is important to note. The last 3 of the cueing systems is structure, and that's sometimes the most confusing, but this is the easiest way. You'll a lot of times learn that ESL kiddos, that they will have a hard time with structure just because they have a hard time with tenses. The structure of the text, this is up to and including the substitution, should make acceptable English language construction. The question you can ask yourself is, would it sound right to say it that way? You want to say, did they substitute a noun for a noun or a verb for a verb? So in our example, I like to see horses at the farm. Instead, the student said, I like to fly horses at the farm. Now you can only take in consideration what was said up to the error. So I'm only going to look at, I like to fly. Would it sound right to say it that way? Yep. Is it a verb for a verb? Yep. So that means that they were attending to structural cues there whenever they made that error. So that's a little insight on the M, S, and V, which we'll get into. So what we're going to do is we are going to practice on a student as we wrap up our time named Nathan, and he's the cutest little guy. In this video, he has a cold. And so you have to kind of go through his cold sounding voice whenever he talks. Like, it's the cutest thing though. You'll love it. So what I need you to do, I'm going to give you some information about Nathan, and we're going to pretend that we've kind of learned some information about him already because of the sake of time. So I'd like for you to find in your packet, I'm going to stop my share so you can see me here. In your packet, I want you to find the form that says summary form, and it looks like this. You're going to write down some information on Nathan. I'm going to let you know what we've figured out. And then we are going to do a actual reading record with him. So we're going to pretend like we've already heard Nathan read a text. We did the where to begin, where to start test, and we started him on a level H. So on this, you want to go ahead and write his name, Nathan, at the top. And then on title, you want to write down that you had him read The Sleepover Party. The Sleepover Party. It was from System 1, so you would put 1 because it was from the first kit. It was a fiction book, so you'll put an F. And it was a level H. He had an accuracy level of 98%. So if he has an accuracy rate of 98% and we had gotten that far, does anyone remember what level that would be? Would that be hard, instructional, or independent?
Miss Tanya, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Okay.
Will you show the form again? Because I do not think that we have it. Yeah.
We don't have that.
That is definitely not in our packet. Is anyone else out there? Do they have it in their packet by chance? But we
It
do
would
not.
be the absolute last page. Like, it doesn't have a back to it.
If not to, you could write it on a piece of paper. Maybe it got left in the copy machine.
Yeah,
you can
it
write it
might
on
have.
paper there.
Okay, thank you.
No, you're good. If it's a 98%, is that independent, instructional, or hard? So far. Talk it out. You can look at that little graph at the bottom of the page. So far, would a 98% for a level H book, would it be independent, instructional, or hard?
Don't we have to have more information?
We do, but you need to know at each step of the way. So you would be able to know, like I needed to know with him at the 98% accuracy, am I going to continue by asking him the comprehension questions, or is it too hard that I would abandon it and go to something easier? That's a great question.
We would go on, right?
You would go on, that's right. Because if you look here on anything that's 95 to 100%, that's independent. So you're still going for gold. So 98% accuracy. We went on, we asked him the comprehension questions, and he scored a 4 on the comprehension questions. If you look on one of the assessments there, it shows that a comprehension score of 4 is what? It's approaching proficiency, right? Because it shows that in the graph down there. So now we have approaching proficiency and a comprehension score of 4. What would we rate that at? Independent, instructional, or hard?
Independent.
Independent. So we're going to check 1 for independent, and we are going to keep that train a-moving. We are going to say that his self-correction rate was 1 to 8. The way you write that is 1:8. That means that he self-corrected every 8 words. He made a self-correction. And at the end of the accuracy there, you can, that gives you a guide. Usually 1 to 1 to 1 to 4 is a good self-correction rate. 1 to 8 is not awesome. That means that for every 8 words, every 8 errors, not every 8 words, every 8 errors he self-corrected. And his fluency level was a 1. So at this point, his fluency was not awesome. But with the 98 and the 4 for comprehension, we still have him at the independent level. So we are going to keep it moving on up to level I, and we are going to listen. This is the one we're actually going to listen to. He is going to read all about koalas, all about koalas. So you're going to write that down, and you're going to find the all about koalas assessment in your packet right here. And you're going to take that out. And this is the one that we are going to actually code and score. I need to plug in my computer because it says it's going to die. So find your packet that says all about koalas. Oops. And we're going to see what happens here. So now you're going to use all of your knowledge having to do with coding and scoring. If you would like to get out your coding and scoring at a glance off to the side to have as a cheat sheet, you can. You want to go ahead at the top here and put Nathan to be able to say that's the one that you're going to do. And I'm going to pull up the video of Nathan. Okay, so this is going to be all about koalas. I'm going to share my screen here, and we're going to be ready to code. Are we all ready? Okay.
Next, Nathan reads All About Koalas, a Level I nonfiction book. Cindy introduces the text in a standard way. This book is called All About Koalas. Koalas are animals that live in a country called Australia. Read this book to learn all about how koalas live, what they eat, and about their babies.
Also write down anything that you hear as far as reading behaviors are.
This is a koala. It comes from Australia. Koalas live in tall trees called gum trees. Koalas have sharp claws. Their claws help them climb the trees. Koalas have thick fur and white chests. They have fluffy ears and big nose. Koalas' nose help them find food. Koalas eat gum leaves. Koalas sleep in the day. At night, they wake up to eat. Koalas do not drink water. There is water in the leaves koalas eat. They get food and water at the same time. This is a koala baby. A young koala is called a joey. Just like a baby kangaroo, when a joey is born, it has no hair. A koala joey is very small, and the little koala stays in the mother's special pouch. In the pouch, the baby koala drinks its mother's milk. This joey is 7 months old. It is as long as a leaf of
Look at his lips.
branch. The joey travels on its mother's back. It uses its thumbs to hold on. Koalas talk to each other mothers, and babies make soft sounds. Koalas make loud sounds when they are few away. Koalas have a problem today. Some people are cutting down trees to make more room for houses. Many people want to save those trees because koalas need a safe place to call home. That is a problem.
Okay, we're gonna pause for a second. How did you notice, what kind of behaviors did you notice whenever you listened to Nathan just now that you wanted to be able to point out before we add up his total here?
He tried to sound out words. And like when he struggled, he at least tried to figure it out on his own for the most part.
Yeah, do you have an example?
I didn't know how to mark it, but like I forgot how to do it. But I don't remember because I kind of just left it blank. I didn't put check marks above it. I
Okay.
think I'm thinking like helps. No, he said help them. I don't know. I just remember
You're right.
right. So I don't remember. But yeah, he did that. He tried to sound it out.
So I noticed, and this is how I marked it, on page 12, for instance, he would say months. So what I do is I put MO, I put a dot that shows like he's segmenting, and then I put the check mark. He also did it on food. He kind of started it and said food. Like you could tell he was trying to break a word apart there. That's good. He was trying to be able to break words. I want to put that off to the side to remember. What else did you notice?
I'm not 100% sure if this matters or if it was just me, but he wasn't really paying attention to punctuations. It was kind of just, I felt like a lot of it was just together
Okay.
and not pausing.
So with that, you might put off to the side phrasing. So trouble with some phrasing. And that's good to note. Like, are you noticing the punctuation there? Good. What else did you notice? What did you notice that was good that he was doing that showed that he was thinking about what it was meaning?
Well, I was going to point out, I forgot what you called it, but like, remember when you were saying if he does like, it looks like the word like leaf and then loaf and then branch and then bread. What did you call that? Is it like a,
So
you just went over it.
No, that's perfect. He was attending to visual cues.
Yeah, that's it.
It
Yeah.
didn't make sense, but it was visually similar.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you would say he was attending to visual cues when he said branch for bread. That's perfect.
Yeah, and I didn't answer your question, so I'm sorry about that.
No,
but
that
I
is
just wanted
answering the question. That is something that he's doing. He's
Okay.
attending, you're noticing that he's attending to visual cues. It's perfect. What else?
I noticed at one point he like turned the page after, I think it was talking about like taking the trees away from koalas, and he was like, wow. He had his own comment about it.
Yeah. You could tell that he was thinking like, that's interesting. I wrote down on my sheet, I wrote down, well, no, right there. I wrote down, It shows that he's thinking about what he's reading. I also, go ahead.
his comprehension of it, like he's following along with the text then too, right? Or
Right.
no? Would you
I mean, there's a lot of meaning making that's going on. I also noted that he put his finger in the word or in the sentence whenever he was having trouble. Sometimes he kept his finger in too long. Just a side note, kiddos should track with their finger only up to a level C. After a level C, that finger should be taken out because it inhibits phrasing. However, whenever you come to a tricky word, you need to put your finger in the word and then take it out whenever you're done. And that happens at any level. You can be able to do that with. Good. So we noticed a lot about him, things he did well, some things that we could note off to the side. Now we're going to listen to the comprehension conversation with him.
Tell the important information.
So first I should be able to know, where did everybody go? Are you there? Oh, good. I thought I lost you for a second. I was like, where did you go? On here, we needed to be able to figure out what his accuracy was before we go on to the next thing. So go ahead and go through, and I want you to tally off to the side here before we do the comprehension. And if it is an error, then you will put a tally mark in E. And if it is a self-correction, then you will put a tally mark there. However many there are for each line. Then you will total it per page and then total it for the section there. So go ahead and do that quick.
I have a quick question.
Go ahead.
So I'm a first year teacher, and when I did this in student teaching, they suggested if we were allowed to recording until we were like super comfortable with it so that we could go back and check our work. Do you know, is it district to district, or is that something that we can do? Do you know?
That's something you can totally do. It takes extra time, which is fine. But as you're learning, I would definitely recommend recording and then being able to go back and listen to be able to help yourself out for sure. Yeah, that's great advice. Went to a good school. Because of time's sake, and I'm looking, it's 3:48. I want to make sure that we see this. So I just want you to go ahead and check your work as to what you see on this. I'm also going to go ahead and go over go ahead and speak up if you have any questions. But on here, for it, because he started to say koala, and again, speak up if you're having a question about it. That counts as one self-correction there. If we would go and say, this is a koala, You could tell he was going to say koala. That's why they said that he was attending to meaning and structure. Because would it make sense to say koala? Yes. Would it sound right? Yes. Is it visually similar? No. Whenever he self-corrected, we think that he self-corrected because he realized that it was not visually similar. Usually, whatever they attend to at the error, it's the opposite for what they attend to at the self-correction. So because of time's sake, go ahead and fill in this part too with the M, S, and V. So we have one self-correction there. As we go on, there wasn't anything else, and for record keeping sake, they did not do the accuracy checks on Fountas and Pinnell. This one was not a hard one to do accuracy checks for, and they did it anyway. So anyway, on here, there was no other errors for pages 3 and 4. So it would just be recorded as one self-correction there. As you move on, this is what yours should look like. They have fluffy ears and big nose for noses. So nose would be counted as an error. If you say they have fluffy ears and big nose, that makes sense. However, it is not structurally similar because of being singular instead of plural. And is it visually similar? Yes, nose is visually similar to noses. So he was attending to meaning and visual cues here. With the omission of the, that would be one error. So koala's nose help. They said that yes, he was attending to meaning. It made sense, but it did not look right because help was a different tense than helps. However, it was visually similar because help is visually similar to helps. Koala's nose help them. That makes sense. It sounds right. And they call it visually similar. That's a little bit far reaching. They said the T for the T makes it visually similar so that he was attending to all three uses of information here. And then they just noted that he started the word and it was counted as an accurate word. It was not counted as an error. And there was no other errors for the rest of the page or self-corrections. On page 9, he said koala for baby and baby for koala. So here, this is you can only go up to the error when you're analyzing. This is a koala. Does that make sense? Yes. Does it sound right? Yes. Is it visually similar? No. This is a koala baby. Does it make sense? Yes. Does it sound right? Yes. Is it visually similar? No. Baby is not visually similar to koala. And then there's a note off to the side that he was using his finger here to be able to note that, which was good. On to page 10, a koala joey is very small. And so when that happens, you want to count that as a self-correction, but you want to analyze it at the error and analyze what he did to self-correct. So, you can start a sentence with and it sounds right, but it's not visually similar to the. To self-correct, he attended to visual cues there. So you start again, and the little koala stays in the. Does that make sense? The for its, yes. Does it sound right? Yes. Is it visually similar? No. Then as you go on, this joey is 7 months. That's not an error. It's just tracking good breaking of words. Old. It is as long as a leaf. So is as long as a leaf. Does that make sense? Sure, you could say that. Does that sound right? Yep, it's a noun for a noun. Is it visually similar? Yep, on the beginning and end.
You skipped paragraph 11, or area 11, whatever,
Oh,
page 11.
In area 11, that was just a repetition and it did not count as an error or as a self-correction because you're just noting that it's a repetition. That's good. It's as long as a leaf of branch. Now you always have to include the way that they read it. Leaf of branch. Does that make sense? No. Does that sound right? No. Is it visually similar? Yes. The burr in branch and bread. So we know he's attending to visually similar things. So far we have 5 errors, 1 self-correction. Seems like he's attending a lot to meaning and structure here, less to visual cues. And then as you would go here, for time's sake, we have an error here for travels. It was a told. And then the was self-corrected. And then we have here on page 14 that there was a told for loud that goes below the line. It was counted as an error. And then few for far. Whenever we add up all of his analysis, it shows that he had 3. Let's see, let's look at, oh, we still have a little bit here. On page 15, he had no errors or self-corrections. The finger was in and out. Hang on. Oh my goodness, have I not been sharing my screen? Good gracious, I am so sorry. You're probably like, what is this woman doing? I was not sharing my screen, I'm so sorry. So on page 16, those for these, and he was attending to all 3. I wanted you to be able to see what these looked like here, and I can be able to send that to you. Good grief. I didn't even realize I wasn't sharing my screen. No wonder. I was like, why are you asking to go back up? Anyway, okay. So on here, if you look at the total, had a total of 13 errors with 3 self-corrections. So if you look here, there is a total of, if he has a total of 13 errors, that would be 94%. And 3 self-corrections. So with 3 self-corrections, you would go here and say the errors, that's 13, plus the self-corrections, that's 16 in total, divided by self-corrections would give you 5 point something. So you would round it to 1 to 5. It's a 1 to 5 self-correction rate with a 1 fluency score. We won't have time to be able to listen to his comprehension questions, unfortunately, but he answered the comprehension questions. It was very cute. He scored a 2 for the within the text questions, a 2 for the beyond and about, giving him a total of 4 out of 6 for the comprehension section. And then they just asked the comprehension questions. They did not go on to ask the writing questions. So whenever you, let me see here. Whenever you look at, let me share. Where did it go? When you look, bear with me for just 1 second. When you look, I'll just hold it up. I'll just do it this way because I can't find it on my thing. When you look at his scoring here, it shows that he had a 94 for that specific text. He had a 4 for comprehension. That would put him at an instructional level for that level. He then goes on to do 1 higher because he was doing great, and a lot of times, sometimes they have 2 at that instructional level. When he went higher, our new neighbors, it was a level J and it was below 90%. And when it was below 90%, they did not go on and ask the comprehension questions because they already knew that was going to be too hard. They stopped them. And then they stopped the assessment there. That would land him at a level I to be able to be recorded as his instructional score, and a level H, excuse me, for an independent score. So that would be the combination of his assessment. For the comments at the bottom, it says behaviors and understandings. It says Nathan works actively at problem solving and successfully figures out some unknown words using letter sound information. Word solving becomes challenging at level J. He exhibits some self-correction but could monitor more closely, reads with expression. Finger pointing seems to slow fluency. Begin instruction at a level I and move rapidly to level J. So this process really does go quickly whenever you're in the moment and as you kind of get some reps. As you get started into this, I'm available to be able to answer any questions and your team teachers to be able to go for speed. Again, this was done really quick. It's usually a whole day training, but hopefully you feel like you know where to start. It's going to be that where to start test. And then you can go ahead and work from there to be able to see what happens. You guys have been wonderful. Hopefully this was helpful. I'll stick on the chat for a couple minutes if you want to hang around and ask some additional questions. But if not, I'll be available through email, and you guys have been wonderful. Lori, I don't know if you have anything that you need to say at all. Doesn't look like she does. So have a great day. Lori, do you have anything to say? Lori?
No, I think everything's good on this end.
Okay.
Any last questions? Anybody?
All right. I'll hang.
Guys, reach out to your coaches because we've all had training as well.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Miss Tanya. Thank you.